everyone, my name is Sarah Garcia, and I'm a senior at Monmouth University, and I'm the host of Generation Zen. So I want to share with everybody how I got out of a dark place, how I found my identity, and the hope that I know exists. So I'm going to be sharing my personal testimony. I was raised Christian and I knew the fear of God from a very young age. I watched the Left Behind series at a young age, if you know, you know. And both my parents are immigrants from Bogota, Colombia. So my parents were very strict and it was a conservative household. And if you can relate to this, strict parents create sneaky children. So I had that cultural barrier. So I always felt kind of left out in my friend groups and just in general. So in high school, when I was introduced to drinking and everything else that comes in high school, I felt included and I just wanted to do everything to fit in. And I was able to get away with this because I started to lie to my parents. I started to do everything possible to sneak around things or to get away with it or convince them that it was something that it wasn't. Because ideally, or really, if they knew what I was doing, they wouldn't have let it happen. So yeah, I became really sneaky. And I now was a freshman in high school drinking and smoking and hanging around the wrong crowd. And then I was always like, I had goals. I was academically driven because I wanted to go to a 4-year institution, which I did. Monmouth gave me a very generous academic scholarship, but that was only because I had to work hard academically in high school. And I did. And then I went to college and everything really transferred and stayed the same, except it just got worse or it just was more repetitive and more intense. So more drinking, more smoking, more boys, more trying to fit in with the people that I was surrounding myself around. And it wasn't the people around me that were bad people. I was just making bad decisions, if that makes sense. So I was really the typical college girl. And then it was now my sophomore spring semester. And I decided to get into competitive bodybuilding. I started training in January. And I knew from the day that I started with my coach, like with check-ins, that I was going to compete on August 13th, 2022. So I created a goal, and from that day, I knew that I was going to fulfill it, and every session and every long day was all to lead up to me being on stage. And through this process, the reason I got into it is because I was so self-disciplined and I thought that I could push my body to the limits and be mentally stronger than people around me. I wanted to challenge myself and put myself to a test. And almost too, looking back at it, I could see it as me trying to find my identity and my purpose. So I got into it and I didn't really know at the time the consequences and just the path that it was going to take me. But I'm going to get into it and it gets a little personal, but it's all part of my testimony, and everything that I went through is what brought me closer to Jesus. So it's all important. And the malnourishment and the training that I was going through had my hypothalamus turned off. I had really no emotion and I was just very cold. I became very self-obsessed. I became narcissistic. I had really bad body dysmorphia. And I distanced myself a lot from my family. I cut off really all my friends because during this process, I couldn't drink. And everyone that I had in my life was incorporated with drinking somehow. You know, like that was how we found our hangouts, or like going out to eat and drinking, or going to frat parties and drinking, or pre-gaming together and having fun drinking that way. So when I got into bodybuilding, I couldn't drink anymore. You just can't drink anymore because it's the empty calories, and my coach just said, like, you can't drink. It was just something, a guideline that I had to follow. And I knew that, and it actually didn't bother me that I had to stop drinking, because it was exhausting drinking all the time. I was drinking all the time. I was drinking a lot. So when I got to that point, I was very isolated. I was very self-obsessed. I lost so many people doing that process. I had a boyfriend at the time that I completely just did a 180 on. I was I was a very positive person before. I didn't give my life to Jesus yet, but I was very optimistic, and I like to see the good in things. Like, I was a good person, but when I started competing, you know, it turned around completely. I only cared about myself, and the only thing that was going through my mind was my training sessions, sleeping, and the next meal, and I was going to bed hungry. So I was just kind of a mess, but I was doing it to be on stage, and I wanted to win, and I wanted to be the best. So once again, I got wrapped into like the self-obsessed, and at the same time too, I was battling such bad body dysmorphia. I thought that I didn't look good, and I had to lose more weight, but it was nearly impossible for me to lose more weight. Like, I was tiny. So I competed. I did well. I placed. I didn't win. I can't remember. I think I did have the mindset of like a winning mentality. Like, I wanted to get first. I think I was the youngest competitor there. It was an NPC show. And the days that lead up into the show, you have to not drink water. So you have to deprive yourself of water. And you start only having ice cubes because you want to deplete yourself completely. The day of my show was the day that I felt emotion for the first time in probably like 6 months. So the foods that I could like have, and I knew that the process was over. I got like over excited. So many people brought me like little baskets of like snacks that I haven't had in months. I had like an energy drink. I was more thirsty than hungry, honestly. So I was drinking a lot of water. I was having these energy drinks. I had like a Dunkin' muffin was one of the first things I got off stage. And I was just a lot of sugar, a lot of snacks I haven't had in a while. Then I went to dinner with my family. My sister also competed. So everyone was there. We had an Airbnb. We went to dinner. I had a big burger and fries. And I've heard a lot, if you know about the bodybuilding culture, a lot of people say, you know, like the day after or the dinner after, like post show, like you're probably going to throw up. You eat a lot. And I always said to myself, like, that's not going to happen to me. I can control my food decisions, and I had a good relationship with food before, so I never thought, you know, but I just ate so many snacks. I had so much sugar, and I had this burger and fries, and I remember sitting at the dinner table, and I was like, I'm gonna go to bed. I'm gonna throw up. So I remember getting up. I didn't even want to talk. I didn't want to say it out loud. Like, I didn't want to tell anyone I'm going to throw up, because I knew it was going to feel more real. And then I was going to like throw up at the dinner table. So I just kind of like walked really fast to the back. Also, if you don't know, you get a spray tan. And the last thing that I remember is being bent over. My hands were on my thighs. And the spray tan was sweating off. I remember picking up my hands, and it was just sweating off. I was sweating so bad. And I was like, this is not normal. Like, I just came here to throw up. Like, why am I not throwing up? And it's so beautiful, because I know that Jesus always had his hand on me. And I just remember something bad was going to happen. I just remember something I felt like it came over me, like something really bad was going to happen. And I was not even conscious, I think at the time, but I had to get up with everything that was inside of me and get help. So I went out and I can literally envision the hallway. I can envision like the tiles. I can envision everything around me. It was such a traumatic experience. And it was my older sister's boyfriend at the top of the table. And he was the first person I knew I was going to see when I came out of the hallway. And he saw me, and I was walking like crazy because I was about to faint. I've never fainted in my life before. And he saw me and ran because you could just see from just my body language that I was about to faint, like fall over. So as I was falling, he caught me. And from then, the ambulance came. There was like 8 people. There were so many people there because everyone just thought the worst. Because it was the worst. It came out to be the worst. I just kept fainting and I like could not gain consciousness. They were trying to figure out what was happening. Like nobody knew what was happening. And it was the first time I couldn't respond. Like I was paralyzed. Like I could hear what was going on. I could hear my mom freaking out, screaming and freaking out in Spanish. Then I could hear my dad like holding my hand, not knowing what was happening to me because, like I mentioned before, there was a cultural barrier. And my parents always supported me, but they also didn't really understand why I was pushing my body to these limits. And, I was a baby. I was 20. Yeah, I just turned 20. So then, like their daughter is now like almost dying and they have no idea what's going on. So I just remember feeling the pain too, that I had to put them through this. I didn't know it was going to happen, obviously, but to summarize, I had insulin shock to my body. There was just so much going on that my body hadn't had in so long. And then I pushed my body too hard and there was just consequences. There was consequences to it. And that was one of the scariest days of my life. And it took me time to even be able to, I don't know how I'm not crying. Last time I told the story, I was crying. But I feel like when you go through something that's scary, looking back at it, why wouldn't I have put in my trust in God for saving me in that moment and for giving me like another chance? And I didn't. It actually got 10 times worse. I then lost the structure of being in bodybuilding. And so I developed really bad anxiety. And it was now my junior year of college. And it was more drinking and partying than ever before because I didn't drink for so long. And I wanted to go back to like having a normal life. And I broke up with my boyfriend. So I was again just filling voids. It was probably my most promiscuous era ever. And I also developed a really bad binge eating disorder. And I just remember feeling so lost, and it was one of the darkest times of my life. I remember my mom tells me now, there was times I would go like weeks without talking to my family. And I just kept thinking that there was something that I was going to do to help feel how I was feeling, to help overcome the binge eating that I was doing. But I remember I was binge eating because I was so stressed that I couldn't find my identity because I put so much of myself in the bodybuilding, and then it was over and I felt like I didn't know like what my life was anymore. I just gave up 8 months of training for just one day of being on stage. And then I nearly died the day of that big day. And I couldn't recognize that my identity wasn't bodybuilding, and it wasn't being self-disciplined, and it wasn't training hard and eating low calories. So I was binge eating because I was just so stressed and I was just so anxious, and I just wanted something, like it was comfort. Like I just wanted to feel better emotionally. I went through, this was now my self-help phase, because when I was in that training period and the eating and schedule, I didn't really have time for myself. Like I didn't do things for my mental health. So now that I have like this normal life, I tried to incorporate, and I would I remember watching so many videos like self-help, and I got into like chakras and therapy, and I just really wanted to strengthen myself. And I thought it was how I was going to reach my goals, by being able to find myself again. I remember that semester, it was the only time really in my life that I strayed away academically. I remember I didn't like care about school. I didn't really go to class that often, which is very unlike me. Like my parents were afraid, but it was just so unlike me. But it was because I was in this dark hole that I couldn't get out of. And I was more narcissistic now at this time than I was during the time of my bodybuilding. But I knew, I was just like training to like look a certain way. But then after, like when I was having this binge eating disorder and anxiety and darkness, I was more narcissistic than ever before. Probably like just projecting in general. I just was thinking that I was better than other people, but I was actually like at the bottom. Like I was feeling the lowest I ever had in my life, but I was trying to seem like I was doing my best, if that makes sense. So I also had really bad like anger issues. Every time somebody did me wrong or did something disrespectful, I wanted to one up it all the time. I always wanted to like make it worse or make myself feel better. When I got offended or feeling insecure, I wanted to get back at them and like, be revengeful. So then I remember I always had Jesus in my life. I knew of Jesus, but I never had a relationship with Jesus. So when I had this darkness, I remember journaling, God, I want the plans that you have for me. I don't want to keep living this way. And it was just so exhausting. It was so exhausting. And I would journal this, but nothing I wouldn't change my behavior or my lifestyle. I just remember writing it down. Like I need help, but I didn't know how to seek him. And I thought I was unworthy of it too. I was just hurting people's feelings left and right. I only cared about myself. I did not so great things. So I felt like unworthy of God's love. And sometimes when I would journal and like do little prayers and they wouldn't get answered, or I didn't feel better, I would always just think, maybe it's because of this in my past. Like kind of the good karma, bad karma concept. And I didn't realize that Jesus, it doesn't matter what you've been through or what you've done. He's always there with open arms. And looking back at it, I can just see like the grace that he always had for me and how I kept falling back down, but he always picked me back up. But I didn't realize it at the moment. So fast forward into my senior year, just this past year, just a few months ago, it was the same cycle. I didn't break the cycle. I was, becoming a better person. I was getting closer to like graduation. I knew I had to stay more focused, but I didn't break the cycle. I was still falling into the worldly patterns. I was still doing things to fill a void. I still was narcissistic. I still was self-absorbed. I still had like anger issues. And I started to pray, do little prayers or journal more. And I just remember I always tied God into it. Even if I just like vented or like I gossiped like through journaling, at the end I would be like, thank you, God, for the things around me that are good, even though there is bad. You know, I don't know how to explain it, but I do remember I did try to seek God in little ways, but I wouldn't change my behavior. Fast forward to October of 2023. I was so exhausted. I was done. I was exhausted. I was drained. I remember nothing exceptionally crazy happened. Just I was reflecting more on my actions, on my behavior, on this pattern that I still haven't broke, that I knew wasn't serving me. I knew it wasn't serving me. I knew that what I was doing wasn't going to create the plan that God has for me. I wasn't going to reach my highest self, if you will, with the things that I was doing. I remember just thinking to myself, I need to change. I need to change or nothing is going to change. That's what I remember thinking. I keep doing things. I keep going back. I would say to myself, I'm no longer going to do this. But then I would go back to it. And it was just a cycle. But then I remember deciding, like, I'm going to break the cycle for real. I was a Sunday Christian. I would go on Sundays to get the message. And I would really be into it. You know, I would take notes. I'd be like, oh my gosh. You know, like, yes, like that sounds good. And I wouldn't apply it into my life. I would hear all this good news. But then again, also I would think, is it for me? Is it not for me? Like, is God's love really for me? Can I actually really cast all my anxieties on him? You know what I mean? I wasn't believing that the Holy Spirit is strong enough to pull me out of anything that I was with. That if I call upon God, that he can help me with decision making and financial stress and anything you can imagine. So then I said, I'm going to start cutting things out of my life and for real, keeping it that way. So slowly and surely, I started to change my lifestyle, little habits, little things. And when I would go to church, I would take notes and absorb it, but try to apply it into my life. And then I broke out of the Sunday Christian cycle. I started to seek God Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Not every day, but you know what I mean? I tried to do it more than just one day a week. And then I read my favorite verse ever that helped me, because part of me thought that, you know, my past defines me. And it's something that I think was holding me back from getting closer to God, because I just felt so ashamed. And my favorite verse ever is 2 Corinthians 5:17. And it says, therefore, if anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come, the old has gone, the new is here. So when I read that, I remember the first time, like, I couldn't really believe it. I was like, is it true? Like, I don't have to be correlated with my past anymore. Like, I can really be made new. Like, I can have like this mind renewal. And I started to believe it. I started to have faith. I started to believe in something that I couldn't physically see in front of me. I wasn't relying on like self-help books, and I wasn't relying on like other people's YouTube videos and how they got their happiness. I started to rely on things that I couldn't see. So once I started to do this, I started to have like this mind renewal. I started to feel so refreshed. I started to pray to be able to fight temptations. I started to pray for things that I really wanted, and sometimes they didn't come out the way that I thought they were going to, but God would answer in different ways. And I started to observe what was happening in my life and how differently I felt and the inner peace that I started to feel for the first time in my life. For the first time in my life, I felt so sure that I am where I am because God has a plan for me through every single situation that I go through. And when bad things happened, or when like people were mean, instead of, like I mentioned before, I would always want to like be revengeful back, I would start to think, I used to be that same way. Like I used to have whatever they're feeling, I used to do that too, because I felt I was at like a dark place. So I started to show humility. And that's when my life really started to change, when I started to practice patience, self-control, and the fruits of the Spirit. So I started to like hear other people around me and things that they were going through, like in college or about to transition into college, and just like the younger generation. And every single time I heard something, I was just able to relate to it. I just want to be like, there is good news. And there is so much hope in Jesus Christ. And one verse that really stuck with me, that helped me realize that it wasn't me trying to, I didn't have the strength and the willpower to be able to do all the things I wanted to accomplish. Is Zechariah 4:6. It's not by might nor by power, but by my Spirit. So I started to realize that God has the final word, and God can give me the strength to overcome things that I never thought could be imaginable. And I wanted to start, giving other people the good news. I wanted to preach the good news. Like, this happened to me. I know it could happen to you too. All you have to do is have faith and seek God. And I just want to be a disciple and be able to touch at least just one person who listens to this. And I hope my story can, travel anywhere and everywhere it needs to go. And I just wanted to speak a little bit about myself, but I just want you to know that I love you and I'm praying for you. And if you need anything at all, I will have my email somewhere so that you can reach out to me. And I want to make sure that if you have something that you're struggling with, that I can either make a whole episode about it, or we could even do just a one-on-one. But this is something that I'm very passionate about, and I just hope that you know that you can transform your life, and it can happen quickly. Like, it happens so fast for me, and it's the confidence that I have in God, and it can happen to you too. So thank you for listening, and I'm so happy that you're here, and I will see you guys next time.